Starting off this morning, we'll be talking about advocacy, how to get the win. And for this, we introduce Bruce Adelson. Take it away, Bruce.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody, and greetings from lovely, rainy Montgomery County, Maryland today. So we're going to talk about Advocacy 101, as you heard, how to get the win. Just as a little bit of background about me, I've been an attorney for many, many years, former senior attorney with the Department of Justice. I teach at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law, the Georgetown University School of Medicine. Implicit bias, discrimination, civil rights, organizational culture are my main specialty areas. But today we're going to talk about advocacy. That's something I talk to my students a lot about, talk to other groups a lot about, and I think as you heard, to me, advocacy to be successful it's about winning. It's not just about talking. And I've come across more and more recently this sense that, well, we're advocating, but we're talking to like-minded people. And to me, that's not advocacy. It's convincing people of the righteousness of your position and persuading them. So with that, that's my brief little bio. Let me share my screen and we will get started. Okay, so winning at advocacy. Now, all of the memes, GIFs, and videos that you will see are courtesy of and with the approval of my son, who is my graphic design meme consultant advisor. I am not allowed to put anything out to the public until he vets it, which he has done. Gave me a big thumbs up in a text today. So on that note, let's get started. And to begin, this is my idea of at least the personification, the dramatic aspect. When you walk into a room, this is winning. And if those of you who are familiar with it, this is from the Netflix program, Better Call Saul. But that is winning, exuding confidence, assertiveness, and as my wife likes to say that I do, setting the agenda. The agenda is whatever it is that you're there to talk about, whatever position you are there to advance, whatever goal you have. That attitude is that body language is extremely important. So I have a couple examples here of issues that have been paramount in interpreting and translation for a long time. And they continue to be. And I have a rhetorical question to ask about that after I do these screens. So this is from a survey published a few years ago by Massachusetts General Hospital. As you can see, my wife does not speak English. When she called them something, they laughed and didn't answer. They didn't call an interpreter. The interpreter was already gone for the day. A doctor who I saw, not my primary care provider, assumed that I don't speak English from the beginning of the visit. He spoke to me like I was a child. And a study in Healthcare Risk Management Review from 2014, the three most common sources of medical errors attributed to insufficient patient language assistance: use of family members, friends, or non-qualified staff as interpreters; clinicians with only basic foreign language skill try to communicate without using qualified interpreters; and cultural beliefs and traditions that affect healthcare delivery. So I'm sure you've seen, heard of, and experienced, if not one of them, all of them. And the question that I have is, why here in 2024 are these issues, do they still exist? And why are they still as predominant as they are? You know, this is not 1965 or 1972 or 1958. It's 2024. And the need for language assistance, qualified language assistance, qualified professional, proficient interpreters and translators has long been established. But there's still a big gap between what we know and what actually happens on a day-to-day basis. Why? Now, there are a lot of explanations for that, but One of them ties into what we're talking about today. How is this advocated for in the public school setting, for example, with the principal, with the teacher, with the school board? How is it discussed? Is it discussed? And what is the point of view that's being advanced? Because to me, I mean, I see and hear this all the time. To me, it shouldn't be about what we have to do or what is needed to do or what the law requires. In 2024, it's about, well, how do we do this? It's not a debate about whether we should do it, whether it's important, whether it's legally required. How do we do it? And that ties into how do you advocate? And there's just other examples of issues that have been around in healthcare for a long time. And certainly the importance and salience of interpreters is also very well established, understood, and accepted in many, many, many areas. Memorial settled Spanish translation suit for $1 million relates to a settlement with a healthcare provider in Colorado about, it was more than 10 years ago, involving an incredibly tragic case that also resulted in significant federal involvement for a period of many years. My feeling is that the appropriate use of interpreters and translators, the professionalism of what they do, the importance of what they do, is like hand washing in healthcare. Hand washing did not become a standard practice in healthcare until relatively recently, but hospitals have done massive programs on the importance of clean hands, washing hands before seeing a patient, after seeing a patient, so that they've been able to cut down infection rates to a certain extent. But it's an accepted practice. It's accepted like paying an electric bill. That you just do it. It's something you know you have to do. That's where language assistance, in my opinion, should be. It should be as routine in a hospital setting as in any other setting, with something similar as washing your hands. We shouldn't be debating this anymore. There's nothing left to debate. There's only left to discuss, how do we do this? What's the best way to do this? So, as an attorney, I like to consider that I'm a professional advocate because in my professional obligations, I'm required to be an advocate. It's spelled out. The word avocat in French comes from the Latin verb advocare, which became the verb to advocate in English. Attorneys are required to be advocates, as you can see from the American Bar Association's model rules of professional conduct in the last paragraph. As an advocate, a lawyer zealously asserts the client's position under the rules of the adversary system, and it explains what a lawyer is supposed to do. Be a negotiator, seeks a result advantageous to the client while being consistent with honest dealings with other people. An evaluator, a arguer, an advocate. That's what we do. So when perhaps this is one of the reasons that I've taken to talking about advocacy so much, because I am a professional advocate. Yeah, I'm not a professional lobbyist in the sense that I'm registered with Congress, but I am a professional advocate that is part of my job, my oath, my ethical obligation, and my pleasure to do on behalf of clients. I am a licensed attorney in Maryland as well as some other states, and I live in Maryland, so that this is part of my obligations as a Maryland attorney. And as you can see, such as in this bottom paragraph, attorneys present facts, formulate issues, and advance arguments in the matters under consideration. The decision-making body, like a court, should be able to rely on the integrity of the submissions made to it. So a big part of being a successful advocate is having that reputation for honesty, fair play, but also knowing what you're talking about. And that is a big part of being effective, so that you can be persuasive in part because you've already gotten over the issue of, well, who are you and why are you here? Oh, Bruce, yeah, sure, come on in. We know all about you, and go ahead and make your case. That's the mindset, is reputation, well known for persuasiveness, well known for honest dealing, and well known for exactly how to get the job done. And this is another example, and I will admit I did not do this literally today, but I did it yesterday. It is showtime. Because when you're advocating, whether it's in a classroom, in a parent-teacher conference, advocating in a larger setting, advocating in many other different scenarios, it is showtime. You should be the center of attention. You should be the one that people look to for expertise, guidance, information, assistance, and things, so that the goal is someone turns to you and says, okay, Bruce, how do we do this? What should we do? What are your suggestions? When that happens, you know you're where you want to be because you're the center of attention and your expertise, your wisdom is being sought. So, how do you do this? Advocacy is about winning. It is your choice what goals and methods you're going to use. Be persuasive and have the last one is really important and something that doesn't get talked about a lot. Compelling narrative. You win by telling stories. And having been an elementary school teacher for many years and now teaching at the graduate level, telling stories is a big part of what I do and what I've done as an educator. That's a good way to persuade, convince, explain whatever the goal is of my teaching to use an example. Oh, well, we're talking about X, Y, and Z. Well, let me tell you a story. That's what they talk about on Capitol Hill. That's what they talk about in state legislatures. Compelling narrative. Tell a story. Tell a story. We've all, as parents, we've all had the opportunity when our children were young to tell them stories. Sometimes we have to make up stories like right at the moment. But that's what advocacy is. If done successfully, compelling narrative is an absolute winner. Why are we here today? That's also something that is a control mechanism that could be used in various meetings where someone who is running the meeting will say, okay, why are we here today? But the goal is that they look at you and say, okay, Bruce, why are we here today? What is it that you want to talk about? That's half the battle. I already have your attention. You're turning to me for my expertise. Now I'll tell you why we're here and I'll tell you what I want. And as you see at the bottom of the picture, we are here to set the agenda. We are here to explain what it is, whatever the goal is, why you're having the meeting, and then move off square one to wherever it is you want to go. 7 kind of, I don't want to say that they're rules, but they're good adages to live by when you're looking at winning at advocacy. The first is establish reputation for expertise. That doesn't come quickly, it doesn't come immediately, it comes over time, but you want to have the reputation that I know this and I'm going to help you understand it and also help explain how we get to wherever it is that we want to go. So having that reputation for expertise is absolutely essential. You build up to it by talking at various meetings, doing presentations. The work of your organization is establishing they're the go-to people. She is the go-to person. I want to hear what she has to say. Listen is number 2. Listening can sometimes be hard because sometimes the person you're listening to is saying something that you strongly disagree with or that has gaps in the presentation that you're really eager to fill in. You have to bide your time and wait until you gather more information by listening to more people and then step in with your opinion or advice. Engage with your constituency group, whatever it is in your community, professionally, other translators, interpreters, that's up to you. but there is strength in numbers in the sense that having other like-minded people who can partner with you in advocacy, but also as a way to test arguments and presentations. One of the things that I did when I started my legal career, and I have done a lot of courtroom work and litigation in my career, is practice a little bit in front of a mirror. I'm originally from the Bronx, New York, so I talk with my hands a lot. And I also can speak loudly, and I'm trying very hard not to do that right now. But I had a judge who told me once that speaking with my hands distracts him. So he would appreciate if I didn't do it as much. So I started to grip the sides of the podium in the courtroom. But I found that that kind of altered the power of what I was trying to say. So I wouldn't have my hands up here. I tried to keep them down as much as possible and adjust my presentation. And it worked for him because he came up to me after one court hearing and said, I really appreciate what you've done in response to what I asked you, because you're still presenting a good case and good argument. I trust what you say, but now I'm not distracted by seeing the hands move in front of your face as much as I did before. So practicing is an important part of this, and you'll see why in a few moments. Is getting that presentation down, getting that self-confidence up is a big part of this. Create and foster productive relationships. So one of the words that has Eastern European origins, one of my favorite words, is schmooze. Talk with people, establish relations. Hi, I'm Bruce, and good to see you. And what did you think of that presentation? That's part of it, and that can be difficult. There's some people who are more outgoing than others, but it is important, if you're going to win at advocacy, to be a good schmoozer, to develop relationships, to have people recognize you, to be able to go up and say, hey, I haven't seen you in a week. How you doing? And how's your daughter doing in school? That's a big part of this. It's a big part of developing the relationship, establishing who you are, but also it's a good way to foster self-confidence. Telling the story is in a larger font because that's probably the most important thing here. Pick stories that advance whatever narrative, whatever advocacy goal that you have. You all have them, whether personal, professional, or both, that can be used that do tell a compelling story that you can use to advance your position and persuade the person that you're speaking with of what it is you're trying to advance. So persuade and win, that's part of it, is telling that story. You get people hooked on a good story, hook literally, then you have them. Then they're in a position where they're listening to you. They're receptive on some level. Then you have to close the deal and provide that extra level of persuasion, and also ask them, how can I help you? What can we do together to make this work? Engaging in that type of collaborative discussion can be very effective depending upon the individual, but don't lose sight of the fact that this isn't just a conversation around the kitchen table. You're trying to persuade someone to do something, and you want that persuasion to succeed. That's why I call this advocacy, advocate to win. Don't give up. Sometimes it takes a long time to achieve your goals. Persuading and winning does take time. Having short and long-term goals is a big important part of this. A short-term goal can be just establishing a relationship and then building your expertise, with the long-term goal being whatever it is: funding, ensuring that an interpreter is used every time there is a limited English proficient parent or guardian in a parent-teacher meeting, so that that's not somehow minimized and thought of as insignificant. That's a great long-term goal to have, and then you build steps and figure out, how do I get there? Part of that is the short-term goal of establishing the relationship. informing about legal requirements, new studies, new stories. And speaking of that, I did doing a lot of work with AI and the benefits and the pitfalls of AI. Well, there was a very compelling story a few months ago in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania. That's the county where Pittsburgh is. And a foster family had adopted, let's say, one or two children. I believe the parents are parents with disabilities. The Allegheny County Health Department, I think, had used AI to evaluate the cases of individual families and parents. And for whatever reason, the AI in this case told the caseworker to remove the children from the house. There hadn't been any violence or harm. It was in part because the parents have a disability. So when the parents came in for the meeting, the caseworker told them, the machine told me to take your children away. Now, we can all be just shocked and horrified, as I was when I learned about this. But think about how in a relevant situation, you could use this story. Every time I tell this, people react as I'm seeing some of you do now. It's just with absolute horror that this could happen. Well, if I'm doing that, then again, I have their attention. So now I can bring them into where it is that I want to go. Because remember, I direct the agenda. We're here to talk about what I want to talk about. But that's a great example of an incredibly compelling story, which is now the subject of a significant Department of Justice investigation. Think of stories like that. Think about that narrative that you can use to build a relationship and get to where you want to go for your advocacy position. This is a story also from my legal career. Mr. Toothman was an attorney who was on the opposing side in one of my cases. This happened to be in Virginia. And we had reserved a block of time, I think it was 2 hours, to present argument to a judge who eventually went on to be on the Virginia Supreme Court, had a very illustrative career. Well, she was doing some paperwork before the hearing started, and she invited us to come back to her office. So while she was doing her paperwork, we sat and we, exchanged small talk. But Mr. Toothman kind of went beyond that. He was explaining to us how smart he is and how many cases he wins and where he went to school. And the judge really wasn't saying anything I wasn't really saying anything. But when she was done and she wore glasses for reading, she took her glasses off and flipped them and put them down on the desk. And she paused and she said, Mr. Toothman, I have to tell you, I really appreciate all the stories you've told us today. It's been most entertaining. But now we're done. So now I want you to tell me why Mr. Adelson does not win everything he's asking for today. He couldn't think of anything to say. He was just, I don't know, Judge, I don't know. And she said, okay, let's go in the courtroom and see if you come up with anything in the next 30 seconds before we start. So we go in the courtroom and he's still very flustered. He lost everything that was on the table for argument. So this is a good example of this was a seeming opportunity for him to control the agenda, a seeming opportunity for him to influence the judge, seeming opportunity to present his expertise, which he did not do. The judge was very much influenced by the conversation. I had other cases with the judge, and she knew me, so she was very confident that what I was presenting was persuasive and accurate. We did not take 2 hours. It took much less than that. And as I said, he lost everything that he was asking for, and I won everything that I was asking for. Getting back to methods, And you can look at the Toothman example too as being instructive. Methods of communication, body language is key. And think about in the story I just told you where the judge took her glasses and flipped them and put them down on her desk. Body language. Her being in control of the situation by saying, well, maybe you'll figure out what to say in the next 30 seconds as we go in the courtroom. Looking at people's eyes, very revealing. You can see whether they're paying attention to you. You want them to be looking at you and you want to be looking at them. Hand gestures. People make all kinds of hand gestures, even if it's just resting their chin in their hand or, crossing their arms. We've all heard stories about crossing your arms is not seen as presenting an openness to conversation. So being conscious of that. Posture, not slouching, being affecting a confident manner by, for want of a better phrase, standing up straight, looking people right in the eye and engaging with them. Exude confidence. That is so key here. That you want the people that you're speaking with to know not only that you mean business, but that you know what you're talking about. And then the pivot. In meetings, there always comes a situation where, Bruce, we're not going to be able to go as far as you suggest today. Then thinking, okay, my backup plan is that we go here. Instead of going to B, we go to C. Being prepared for that, having that in mind when you get into a meeting and into an advocacy situation of not going all the way to what your ultimate goal was, but going part of the way. Being prepared for that and to pivot and move off of the main issue that you're advocating or the main goal that you want to achieve, but going somewhere on the spectrum that eventually gets there, but doesn't get all the way today. Volume does not equal effectiveness. There are a lot of people who advocate, let's just say on Capitol Hill, who like to scream and talk really loudly. And somehow they think that gets them where they want to go, but it doesn't. They just turn people off. So yelling, speaking loudly those are really counterproductive and do not equate with effectiveness and don't get you any closer to winning. There was a show that many of you may know about, The Office, that was on NBC several years ago and is now on one of the streaming services. Well, there's a famous song by Kenny Rogers called The Gambler, which connects with the pivot idea that I just mentioned, is knowing when to keep going, when to stop, when to pivot, when to come up with a secondary goal. And sometimes you have to do this on the fly and think of it as this is actually occurring. So to make that point about you got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them, we have this brief musical interlude.
Bruce, I'm not sure if we're having trouble listening to the audio.
Okay. Well, you saw the image. So that was one of the important things. So let's move on. Okay, thank you. I want to avoid. This is one of the more famous scenes in American presidential politics over the last 50 or so years. This was the 1988 presidential election, which featured a third-party candidate, Ross Perot, the Republican nominee, who was the incumbent President Bush, and the Democratic challenger, Bill Clinton. There was a debate where all three candidates were positioned on stools and answered questions. Well, there's a very famous scene, which took some doing to try to find a good picture of this, that you'll see in a moment. Look at to my left on your screen, look what President Bush is doing, and he's the one who's standing up. What is he doing? He's looking at his watch. Now, remember, we talked about body language. What does that show me? What does that show the viewers? He doesn't care. He wants to get out of there as quickly as possible. This was relatively early in the debate. He was pilloried after this for doing that. Major criticism that he couldn't be bothered to be part of a conversation. So don't look at your watch and be aware that body language, people are watching you. People are aware of what you're doing, even if you don't think they are. This was just a stunning mistake that in some ways you could say he never recovered from. He lost his attempt at reelection, and I'm not saying that he lost just because of this, but not understanding body language is just crucial because the media focus after the debate was not on the issues that he talked about. It was his looking at his watch. Pragmatism. You got to read the room and know where people are coming from. If you sense hostility, resistance, it may actually be present, which is going to make your task a little more challenging. Wow. Do you continue to go with your plan A, or are you going to be prepared to go to the pivot somewhat earlier? But looking at people's expressions, really important. And if, let's say, this is a budget meeting where you have some specific monetary goal, but people are already not in a welcoming mood, then you may have to shift to something else. And this is an example. I've done some consulting with some doctors and medical societies, and this is something that's planned for later this year. So, as we know, there's a big debates in Washington these days about budgets and budget cuts and budget increases. Well, this particular society is planning to ask for billions more money to certain federal agencies. They're even asking for discrete funding increases to benefit a specific cause, even though the federal agency that would be responsible for this particular issue doesn't want, they don't want it. They don't want the money and they don't want to advance this issue. But the society is convinced that this is the way to go. Bad news, bad approach. You don't decide who gets what money. You don't decide what agency controls, enforces, puts out policies on any particular issue. They do. But to go in and say we want X, Y, and Z, when the handwriting's already on the wall, you're not going to get this. And these days in Washington, having expansive budget increases, that's just not going to happen. So readjusting priorities, understanding, reading the room and knowing what the facts are on the ground is really important here, because not doing that and not paying attention means you will be taken less seriously. People will think, oh, Bruce is a joke. Why? He has to know that we're not going to do this. Why is he continuing to push us to do it? So this engagement, this presenting issues, regardless of the reality of the situation or regardless of the position of the organization or the person you're talking to, it's just talk. So it's just blah, blah, blah for the sense of talking. Okay, well, we all like to talk and we all have conversations that may not be goal oriented as far as advocacy. But if you're in an advocacy position, it's not just about the talk. You got to know whether what you're advancing has a chance of success and how to get there. If it doesn't, and if you're getting early messages that forget it, we're not doing this, just to keep talking about the same thing is harmful. It hurts your reputation. It hurts the cause that you're trying to advocate for. You have to be pragmatic in the ask and pragmatic in your presentation. So there's another situation involving some doctors that I work with where the doctors presented concerns about two specific issues. About prison lighting affecting the people who were incarcerated, bright lights affecting their ability to sleep, for example, and concerns about countries in war using tear gas in small confined spaces. Very important issues of great concern, and the doctors were expressing their concerns. Okay, so then what's next? But what's next was they just talked about it. So if you're expressing these real heartfelt concerns about serious issues, don't you want to try to resolve them? Don't you want to try to see, how could we improve the situation? But they didn't even think that way. All they thought about was just talk for the sake of talk for the sake of having a commonality of position with like-minded people. Okay. But there are ways that you could advance this and may actually achieve some success in alleviating the concerns that you have. So where's the action? Where's the plan to address these concerns? The answer is they didn't have any. The examples of possible actions would be talking to the Department of Justice and the Bureau of Prisons about lighting conditions. As doctors, they might even have the opportunity to have access to have these meetings. Same with at the state level, state correctional superintendents. Going to conferences to advance the issues of their concerns about lighting and the use of tear gas in confined spaces. Instead, and I will admit that, one of my biases, if you will, is okay, talk is cheap. Let's do something about this. Let's achieve this. Let's go and talk to the Maryland Superintendent of Corrections. Let's try to change this. It was very difficult for them, and they were unable to pivot and unable to really think in these terms. But I guess that, as I talked about at the beginning, I am trained to advocate and I am trained to win, and I know how to do it. They're not, and they don't. They don't have the same training that I do or the same experience that I do. And that came up really clearly in this particular conversation. Another example, that medical society conference last year, a training for new doctors. And there was a discussion about they're going on Capitol Hill to advocate for $59 billion for this particular agency. Are you kidding me? In this climate, a $59 billion increase? How about there is absolutely no way that that's going to happen? And the newer doctors, they had a sense of that why are they asking us to do this? Because just read the paper, watch the video, go on social media. This is not going to happen. So they were less interested in wanting to know, well, why should we be advocating for $59 billion? But they wanted to know what we've been talking about today. Well, how do you advocate for something? Tips about body language, being ready with plan B, and how do you go for the win? Now, here the win is not asking for $59 billion, but asking for something else, or taking a longer term view that maybe we can come back to this another day. Let's talk about policy. Let's talk about policy A that can improve the situation of whatever constituency or group that we're advocating for. The presenters at this conference and the medical society didn't want to hear that, but the audience did, which was a very interesting dynamic for me. Knowing the room, clearly the medical society didn't know the room, understand the vibe. They weren't making necessary adjustments, and they weren't interested in advocating for learn to advocate another day. They wanted this now, even though it was going to fail. And in the end, it did fail because the agencies, we can't do this. There's no way that the administration is going to give us this money, and there's no way that Congress will appropriate it. So you got something else for us to talk about? From the show Breaking Bad, I am the one who knocks. Well, you're the one who gets the attention. You're the one that people turn to. Okay, Bruce, what is it that we're here for today? You're the one who sets the tone, sets the conversation, decides the priorities. Interesting conversation I had with a senior U.S. Senate committee staffer about advocacy on Capitol Hill. And she had 4 very good bits of advice. Don't just show up like, all right, I'm here today and we're going to talk about whatever. No, you're there. You're taking their time to advance an issue of importance to you. Do it. Don't just sit there. Well, yeah, okay. Well, I don't really feel that strongly about it. Then go home. Why are you wasting their time? Don't advocate just to justify your existence. There are a lot of groups who will do that, who will plan Capitol Hill days or plan lobbying events just to show their members that they're active and they're doing something and justify the dues that the members pay. That's not successful, and the staffers can see right through that. Understand what's happening, again, relating back to the budgetary issues that we just talked about, and the group of physicians who were concerned about using tear gas in confined spaces in war. Understand what's exactly happening. Come with facts, narratives, stories, persuasions to advocate successfully on the Hill. And again, compelling personal narratives tell the story. Like, the computer told me to take your children away. Compelling stories sell. They get people's attention. That's something they remember and resonates with them. That's what you need to be a successful advocate. Controlling the dialogue is really important. And these are, excuse me, these are also useful in that I've used and have been successful with in the courtroom, for example. So ask open-ended questions. Don't say, isn't it true that you live in Delaware? Because the answer is either going to be yes, no, or I don't know. And then where do you go from there? Because the conversation is over. Open-ended questions. Look for follow-up opportunities. Asking follow-up questions. Even if the question that you're asking you don't feel totally convinced of, or maybe you're not totally familiar with, but just ask a question. Even if it's about the weather, ask a question so that you can engage and connect to an opportunity for follow-up. Well, let's meet again. Let's talk about this further. Well, after this committee meeting, let's get together and talk about what happened. It shows you're interested and committed in what, not only what you have to say, but in what the person that you're advocating to, what they have to say. Show sincerity and interest. If you ask a question, focus on the person you're asking the question to with eye contact. That shows real interest. It shows that you're genuine. It shows that you're empathetic. It shows that you're professional. It shows that you are interested in what the other person is saying. It's easy to do. It's just eye contact, being intent, not crossing your arms, being attentive and listening. Boy, you'd be surprised how many people have told me, I know you were locked in. I looked at your face. I saw that. And that's something that they really buy into, something that is on a human level very important, and something I would not minimize at all. It is extremely important. And you can see that the lawyer here is controlling the dialogue. Everybody's looking at her. That's what you want. You want everybody looking at you in an advocacy position. So they're paying attention to you. They're not looking at their phones. They're not looking at the clock. They're not doing what President Bush did and looking at his watch. They're looking at you. That's what you want. Again, I just stressing to persuade and win. Advocacy is about winning. Otherwise, it's just having a conversation of what movie are we going to go see tonight. I always find this quote from Abraham Lincoln to be very informative. I claim not to have controlled events, but confess plainly that events have controlled me. Well, to be a successful advocate, which certainly Lincoln knew as a practicing attorney, is sometimes you have to try to control the events, shape the events as they occur in the room, in your presentation, and what you're asking for, so that you can get to where you want to go. But sometimes events can overwhelm a situation like the budgetary realities in Washington. No matter how well-meaning you are, how important your cause is, how poignant the need, you're just not going to get there. So events do influence and control what it is you can present effectively. I repeat these because they are very essential to winning and being successful. Knowing the room, understanding the vibe, make necessary adjustments to pivot, learn to advocate and return another day. This is something that I know can be difficult. Practice and excel in spontaneity. Practice and excel in extemporaneous speech. That's without rehearsal. That means you have to think immediately when someone says, okay, Bruce, A is not going to work. What's your backup? Thinking on your feet, that comes from also why practicing in front of a mirror can be a good idea. Excuse me, but to be a successful advocate, you really have to think on your feet and know, okay, where can we go? Where can I go to win and achieve some success today? Keep calm. I know it could be anxiety producing. Think on your feet is really important. You get there by practicing. You get there by being confident. You get there by understanding that you're going for the win and not just talking for the sake of talking. You be goal-oriented, persuade, and win. That's why you're there. And you're probably not going to be able to hear this one either, but this is a scene from Willy Wonka and the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory in the 70s, where Willy Wonka says something like, you lose. You get nothing. Good day, sir. I think that's so emphatic when it comes to advocacy. My students love this. They really can relate to the scene where forget it, you're gone, you're done, you're out of here. And that's my contact information. So it has been a pleasure to talk with you today. I know we have some time for questions. I hope this has been helpful. So I'm going to stop screen sharing and let's see if we have questions. Thank you very much.
I have two comments preceded by a huge thank you, but I am asking permission to use your line. I am trained to advocate. I'm framed to win. I love it. And I love it for a couple of different reasons for everybody. Interpreters and translators should be the expert at language, right? So all what you have told us about really tuning our message for persuasion goes back to our ability to do our research when we interpret and translate to convey the most accurate message. And by building the arsenal of words, then we are able to build a message that can be enticing, persuasive through storytelling. So thank you, thank you, thank you. My question to you, and I hope I break the ice with questions, is for those that may not feel that comfortable, right? Walk the walk, talk the talk. I love the image of the mirror. You empower yourself and you look at yourself and you tell yourself, you can do this. But what is your practical advice to get started? How do we build our confidence and where do we start to build that knowledge?
That's a great point. And one way I think is giving presentations at conferences or situations like this. They don't have to be lengthy, but just to get experience speaking in public, presenting some type of issue, moving something forward. Yeah, I think that's really important. I think to your point, you should be the experts. You are the experts. And sometimes that's not enough. For some people, it's like, okay, what else you got? I mean, why are you an expert or why should I care what you have to say? But I think that looking at opportunities, whether they're, even if you have younger children, that go to a PTA meeting and ask a question or make some point. Look at with social media, there are all kinds of opportunities to make presentations, get practice in speaking with other people, engaging with other people, and really getting into this whole notion of being persuasive. Now, and clearly we're all different people. Excuse me, we come from different perspectives. And there are going to be some people who are more comfortable speaking for 45 minutes and some people speaking for 5 minutes, and that's okay. Do what, as you said, do what you're comfortable with, do your what's within your comfort zone. But frankly, I'm also a believer in breaking through the comfort zone and trying something else and giving yourself an opportunity to see if, wow, I didn't think I could do that. I think that's an important point too. But remembering you are the experts, no matter what anybody says, there's no question that you are. Then lay your expertise out there to help persuade people for whatever it is you're looking to advance.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I invite the floor. This can be your first maybe attempt to ask questions and to practice what Bruce has just told us. Come on, I know you have questions. I can read your brains. I just don't want to speak it. Betsy, go ahead. Unmute yourself.
Thank you. I was looking for the raise my hand thing. Yes, I wanted to know, like, when you said, thank you so much, Mr. Adelson, your presentation was fantastic. I wanted to know, when you said read the room, you're referring to read our representatives? What experience can you share with us that is about when are we boring them to death? What should we be looking for? And, you know, so we can learn when to pivot, when to, you know, pass it on to a colleague. And then the other question that I have is maybe for the room, and I might have missed it. What are we advocating for? What is our mission at you know, advocating on the Hill? Are we advocating for not using language brokers in educational settings? You know, and so I just wanted to know that. So thank you very much.
Great question.
Please address the first question, yes.
Okay.
And then I'll take the floor for the second one.
Yes, please. Is just looking at, and I do this with my students, in whether it's virtually or in person, and just looking at you today, looking at faces. Are my students, let's say, for example, on one particular day, they don't care what I'm saying and they're using their iPhone, or I see their heads are down, which means they're likely looking at their phone. So rather than say, stop looking at your phone, then I know I need to change what it is that I'm talking about. So then I'll go to, okay, so we're done with point A. Now let me tell you a story about point B. So I reference first, I'm going to tell you a story. Then they will immediately look up at me. Now I know that, all right, now I have to do it. I've gotten your attention. Now I have to bring you in because I tell you this a story that I know will be attention getting. That's why I mentioned the thing that the computer told me to take your children away. That I have used that constantly as a way to set the table for a conversation about, let's say it's AI or language assistance or disability access or all kinds of things. But in knowing with representatives, representatives have, whether they're state legislators or congressional representatives, they have a lot of things going on. And they may not all be at the meeting or all be at the hearing where you are. There will be some who are very interested in what you're trying to say, others less so. But that goes to the point of what I had said earlier. You should know to whom you're speaking. If you're speaking to a group of 10 people, use the wonderful Google search or some equivalent to know who they are. And if they've made some speech or introduced a bill that supports what it is you're doing, you're already halfway there. The obverse is true too. If they've lobbied for, introduced a bill, or made a speech strongly opposing what it is you're trying to present, you're likely not going to gain an ally in the 10 or 15 minutes you have to persuade them. That there may be some opportunities in the future, but you have limited time. Take advantage of your time by focusing on the people that you think are the most persuadable. Look at their faces. Are they looking at you, or are they looking at the clock? Are they looking to the staff member? Are they reading a book? If they're doing any of those things, they're already sending a pretty clear message. They don't really care that much about what you have to say. Then you should be prepared to either pivot to go to something else, or just disregard them individually and focus on the people by looking at them who are actually paying attention to you. Because there will be people who are like that, both sides. And I think given the time that you have, I would focus more on the people who are already looking at you, who you have researched to find they are empathetic to what it is you're trying to move forward. Focus on them in the time that you have, and pay attention, eye contact, body language. Are they resting their heads in their hands? Are they going like this, leaning back? The leaning back thing is a good example of, I don't really care too much what you have to say. Just note that and be aware of it. And if most people are doing it, then you need to go to plan B. The computer told me to take your children away. You need that compelling hook. I guarantee you have a compelling story, they'll look up. And in that moment, you have a moment to try to influence them and keep their attention.
And so tagging that with the what are we going to do on May the 2nd? So we are going to be organized in a way where we are presenting asks. So there is the bigger frame and the smaller frame. The smaller frame is using everything that Bruce is presenting today. So let me go into details. When we advocate on the Hill, we relate primarily to bills, to policies. Some need to be proposed, some need to be reinforced, some need to receive more support from other allies. So it can be more funding. It can be more support because they have to be voted on. It can be because, and there are different states, they may have different bills. And there are others that are of major common interest. So what we have advocated on the Hill in the past month, for example, when those of us at AAITE that partnered with ALC, the Association of Language Companies, we asked for additional funding for the next budget year for the Office of English Learners. And then we also worked on the classification of employers, and another one that at the moment I am not recalling. But how did we do that? By organizing meetings and rehearsing. The advocacy on the Hill happens in this way. Each one of us will be advocating with the representatives of their own states. So what did Bruce told us? Search, read about them, and we will not meet with them. I would say 99% we meet with their staffers. But when we were going on the Hill years ago, before COVID hit, we have had experience to meet the congressmen and women there because they made themselves available to talk to us. Other times, we talk with staffers, and the staffers cover the area that we are going to bring up to their attention. So we're going to be there with material to hand off to them, to send by email, so that they have supporting material for what we are presenting. But how do we plug our storytelling in our asks? Why do we need more funding for the OLA office? Why do we need more support for the classification of employees versus independent contractors? Because all of these issues hinder or enable our ability to deliver services. funding is big deal, because if there is no money, I mean, you have read in the news about the uproar of parents for the firing of the translator because of funding cut. And so this is the first step for us to move on and do more sessions, but the sessions need to be geared also to those that join us on the Hill. Because truth to be told, we need that confidence, we need that preparation, we need that coming forward and fight for what is ours, because it's in the law. We're not asking them to create a different law. It's in the law. So we're just asking them, just as not an exact word, but we are asking them to deliver on what it's on the law. Because we all know that we work with unfunded mandates. And maybe, Bruce, can you talk a little bit to that? When we request funding, they need to justify the fact that schools and districts and educational settings need to deal with an unfunded mandates. I mean, that's a fight that the hospitals have already fought. They continue to fight, but we are at the very beginning of us being active in that arena.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that some have the idea that an unfunded mandate is illegal or it's unconstitutional. That is not true. There are unfunded mandates all over the place. There are always exceptions in budgetary discussions for civil rights requirements, so that if you're required to provide language assistance, for example, that doesn't have to go through various levels of budgetary checks and balances. It's accepted, at least on some levels, as, yeah, there's a law that requires this, so we have to fund it. But I think that individual representatives, yes, because they're very cautious in their own way about providing additional funding, have to be reminded, as you suggest, well, the law was passed in, whatever the year is, and the law requires us to do this, and we're working with children. So that's already an advantage to you. It's children. And that gets people's attention. Whether they eventually agree with what it is you're trying to advocate is something else. But you're already talking about a very sympathetic group of people. They're children that evoke all kinds of thoughts and memories that are more inclined to your agenda than they might otherwise be if you didn't have such a compelling group of people with whom you work. But sometimes the representatives need to be reminded there is an existing law. We're not asking for a law to be passed. We're asking for funding to enable us to obey the law and help the youngest, most vulnerable people in our community move forward. There's a lot of persuasiveness there, regardless of ideology, political belief, regardless of party. That evokes a lot of empathy. So, but reminding them that we want to obey the law. You passed the law in whatever the year was. This is just to obey the law.
No small task.
Yeah, that's right.
Any other questions? We have a few more minutes left.
I have a question.
Yes, please go ahead.
So, circling back to storytelling, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. How could we craft compelling narratives to advance on our cause?
Well, if your cause is for greater funding for language services, well, talking about individual situations that they may even have had some type of, I don't want to say tragic, but particularly compelling outcome where, a child is, I'm just making this up, a child, let's say 10-year-old child who's limited English proficient, has been struggling with English, has just seen a horrible traffic accident across the street, and there's a significant need for emergency attention, but can't tell the story because the interpreter was laid off, or there aren't enough interpreters for this child to be given the language services, not only that the law requires, but to enable the child to move forward. So it's something like that in the sense of compelling or persuasive. And frankly, you all can ask each other, well, what is it that persuades you? When you see stories, read about stories online. What persuades you? What compels you? What gets your heart going? What makes you think, oh my God, how could that possibly happen? This is awful. I'm pretty confident that you have stories like that. And that's something to talk about, to figure out, okay, what are the best stories, the most persuasive stories we can use to advance our narrative and advance our cause? Because in the work that you do, I know, having spent years in teaching, you have them. You just have to figure out what are the best ones to use to achieve your goal.
I also want to encourage you to start kind of thinking about it, because when I am asked the question, okay, so what is your compelling story? Out of the blue, I feel like a deer in the headlights, right? I'm like, oh, what is my compelling story? And then I breathe, right? And I can think of one, and then the call is over, and I can think of 10. And so that element of preparation is also part of our narrative and our preparation on how to make it relevant to them. So how do we tie these compelling stories, for example, to their life and our lives? We will give you also ways to start, and then we can rehearse. When I did it the first time, I had a rehearsing buddy. And so we were truly telling each other. And if you are able to look for a rehearsing buddy in your own state, then you share some similarities, because you also know that even if we have a federal mandate, the system is also administered at the state level. So laws are different when you come down to the state. The administration is different. The way they organize classes and deliver services within the district and the schools is different from state to state, sometimes from county to county. And so having the ability to rehearse gives you, with someone, gives us two winning points. One, we hear ourselves, because the first trick of getting out of our comfort zone is to speak loud. We can have many thoughts, but if we do not know how to send them across, we are not going to be any persuasive in any way. The second thing is that someone else is listening to us, and we don't want that person to say, you did fine, Betsy, or Yvonne, you did great. No, I want you to tell me, well, Giovanna, I would have said this more than that. You use this word rather than the other one. I think that if you say this before the other one, it can be more persuasive. And one of the things that Bruce, underscored is our demeanor shows how strong we feel about these things. And I personally sometimes learn, it's not sometimes, it's more often than sometimes, need to notch it down, because my passion is maybe sometimes too overwhelming. And so I have to, and so reading the room, Betsy, is also, I am talking with a person that is very energetic, and so I can really, talk to them in this way, or is a person that is a little bit quieter, that can be distraught by my being so energetic, and I can do exactly what Bruce did with the judge. So I have to tone it down a little bit. And so I move my hands if I am on video where they cannot see me. And if I am in front of people, I have a notepad, and that helps me as well, right? So I hope this answered your question as well. Any other questions? Still few minutes before we break. Yes, go ahead, Betsy. Thank you.
And listening to all of this, I'm a sign language English interpreter, and I think most of you seem to be two different spoken languages. So we have some different things to advocate for, and different approaches and different ways we've trained our interpreters for years. So I've really appreciated all of this. I'm using my hands too because of sign language, but I'm just now trying to figure out how we can work more closely together, because I think there are some very different backgrounds and very different needs. And I'd love to see more togetherness and support. So again, like Betsy's question, what are we advocating for on May 2nd? For this group, I'm also thinking about sign language interpreters. So I don't know if I have a question so much. I just wanted to put that in there as a consideration.
So I'm happy to report the AAITE is connected with RID and NIA. And for those that are new to these acronyms, both RID and NIA are the two major, are the two organizations that advocate and represent sign language interpreters. And Betsy, I can give you more information about that.
Thank you. I do know them very well.
Yeah, no, you do, but I'm
Perhaps,
talking
yeah.
about the connection,
Mm.
our connection with them. So
Yes, and
we
I've seen
are,
that too.
yes. So
Mhm.
AAITE is an organization that advocates or moves towards the professionalization of the interpreters and translators for spoken languages. And that goes to the very inception of our mission, because sign language interpreters already have their organizations, and it was not up to us to claim any space there. So that's why we're working on collaborating, right? Going to the Advocacy Day, the door is open to all, because our message will be inclusive. And so we have had advocacy sessions with sign language interpreters, and the outcome is powerful. Because at that point, and maybe Bruce, you want to elaborate on that a little bit more eloquently than me, sign language interpreters refer and are covered by a different law, other policies. And so when you combine the two together, that still work towards access, right? We are covered by discrimination or anti-discrimination laws. You are covered by disability laws, but together we talk the same language in the sense that we need to make everybody part of the conversation.
I think that that's a really important point too. I mean, whether it's sign language or spoken language, as you said, it's all about access, and it's all about children having access. And I think those are your key points, that you're already talking about a vulnerable, sympathetic audience, children, and it's about access. It's providing them, their parents, with access to what? Education, which is a commonality and something that everyone can relate to on some level. So you already have a very powerful setup in that you're talking access, you're talking language, whether it's spoken or sign language, and you're talking about education and children. Those are all very compelling subjects. And even the most, I don't know, jaded representative who's been on the Hill for however many years is going to look up when you say access, children, education. They may not agree with you, and I'm not conceding that they would not, but everyone's going to pay attention because you already have such a compelling beginning from which to start.
Any other questions?
Oh, I was just going to say, I also, being from Eastern Colorado, don't even know who my representative might be by the time I get there in May. So,
You know, yes, that's a very good point. Learning where we fall into this huge political system is also very important to understand the dynamics that are at play in our local, because yes, as I said before, things change a little bit from county to county, and then there is a state vision, a state mission, a state, and it's important to always talk, keeping in mind what they do have to deliver on. you know, how is that part of their mission of what they are tasked with? Yeah. Thank you, Betsy, for that. Luis.
Yeah, I have a quick question. I don't know, how I might want to handle it. I know that, we're going to try to make the appointments with people that are open to, being persuaded maybe, or, even just open to listening, at least with their staffers. But in a situation where we're in a district or we're in a being represented by somebody who's not maybe as open to that, to our cause, how do we handle offices like that or situations like that, and what can we do to try to find that common ground to at least move the needle, even if it's a little bit? How do we, um I guess, persuade people to at least listen to us instead of just being completely shut off from the very beginning?
I think, frankly, that's where you look at your stories. That I'll give you an example of something that happened just in the last couple of days. This is a U.S. senator who I won't identify, but very politically conservative. And this was a meeting involving a healthcare issue. And in the discussion, the staffer had a family member who had experienced this particular healthcare condition that was being lobbied for additional funding that day. So her expression just completely changed. And staffers tend to be very open anyway, but she was really keyed into the conversation. Wow, my father had this, and I understand that what you're saying because we've experienced it. And then she said, it's like the $1 million response. I'm going to meet with the senator when we're done. I'm going to talk to him about this because we agree, but this will really be helpful in getting over the line. Now, you're not always going to experience that, but because again, you're talking about children. There are a lot of people who have children who are parents. So even if I'm a representative and you're coming to my office and I'm not inclined to be of the same mind as you, we're talking about children. So give me a good story, get me talking, get you talking. That's a good place to be. And again, because you're coming from where you are with the subject matter that you're dealing with, that's already a tremendous advantage. You're not selling soda. You're not lobbying for increased corn imports. You're talking about children, and that can help you destroy barriers and really persuade people on a very personal level, which if you can do that as an advocate, you're already there with being able to persuade them.
And I also want to add one more thing. Data has power. Sometimes we need to also support our storytelling, the consequences, unintended consequences with data as well. I'm going to give you a very, very simple example that I use a lot when I start talking with staffers, and you can see the demeanor, right? If the person is very laid back, I need to say something for them to say, oh, this is interesting. Let me see what's going on here, right? And so I started saying, do you like music? What kind of music do you listen to? And 9 times out of 10, they do listen to music because all the staffers are very young. And I say, do you know how much the music industry is worth? So much. Do you know that the language industry is double that and nobody knows about us? And so now I type this in. So this is also data, our storytelling from the industry that we're going to share with you. But then you need to do your homework to try to really digest it and make it yours. I mean, I'm not kidding. The language industry, for those of you that don't know, is a $64 billion industry. And we are here trying to fight to have an hourly rate raised a little bit, right? We're not going to talk about rates, right? But I want to give you perspective. So advocacy, as Bruce has told us, is also getting out of the little world that we're in, because for us to get out of the pond, we need to see what is on the other side. And so I think that all of these sessions that we're going to put together for the advocacy, I really, really hope that all of you will join us on May the 2nd, will drive us there. And yeah, together we can. We have already pulled it together last year. We can pull it together this year. Well, we're almost at the end. Any other pressing question before we thank once again, Bruce?
Just one quick one.
Yes.
How do we sustain? I know the momentum is here. How do we keep the momentum going beyond today's workshop?
First of all, there is a call for the board that is out there, and the deadline for submissions is tomorrow. Number two, we want more of you to participate in the conversation, and we also want to start planning for the Advocacy Day. We are planning more of these sessions, but there is only so much we can do if people, join these sessions, but then they don't come on the 2nd. Right? We need to be there. It doesn't mean that I'm saying you should not be in the session if you don't come, but how do we take advantage of that momentum, Yvonne? We need to get ready to be there on the 2nd as well. Hopefully
we have one foot in already.
We do. Thank you.
Oh, yes.
Thank you. And we have someone, our advisory board member, Dr. Bill Rivers, that is organizing all these sessions. But if we don't tell him, Oregon is in the house, Colorado is in the house, Rhode Island and Connecticut and Minnesota, how do you think he can make appointments with people that are not going to show up at the day of the appointment, right? So again, number one, connect with us. We're going to have more sessions that will be advertised. Number two, plan. Now flights, and by the way, those that want to come, please book your room, because the deadline for the early bird for the hotel is about to expire. Please. And three, let's get ready to go. We will have a full program of the asks. That's how we call them. What are we here to ask for? And two, how do we support our asks with the storytelling, with the data, with the demeanor, with the walk the walk and talk the talk? Bruce, we cannot thank you enough. I think you have given us a lot of food for thought. Thank you. We will keep you posted on our Advocacy Day, how they went. And we're going to take a 15 minutes break before we start the next. I just also want to read what Jennifer Santiago say. Thank you, Bruce, for your helpful input. In my case, writing op-eds opened the door for future advocacy opportunities. I'd never published anything before, but felt compelled to activate my writing gift when it came to seeking an exemption from AB 5 in California 4 years ago. So we have it in us. Yes, we can do it. Thank you for activate these gifts in us, Bruce. And thank you for working with AAITE.
Thank you.
Weekend.
Thank you. You too. It's my pleasure. It's great to see everybody. Best wishes for your Advocacy Day and best wishes for winning and persuading.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.